Okay. Right, we're going to need a lot more coffee if we're going to keep on going. All right, folks, I was hoping that this would be a little ready. We've had a new class today, classroom, because our usually scheduled classroom was non-available. Non-available, so here we go. I'm going to pocket for that one. Just put that right there. Oh, spring on it. A little spring ring on that one, huh? Okay. Woo! Bop, bop, bop. All right, folks. Hold it. Okay, folks. Thank you for being here. Welcome to class on our film lecture series, How to Write a Script. Very, very good. Okay? Here we go. I'm going to try to put this thing like this. I told them I wanted my classroom. They said, no, it's busy today. It's taken. So the medical team had to take it for they're doing an experiment and cutting up a hamster or something. So I didn't get the class for today that I wanted. But here we go. This is our new script. Now this script, to start before I even jump into it, we are, for the first time, going to show you how to make more of a fictional type script. Creative writing. This is a sci-fi movie, okay? So this is, think aliens, UFOs, alien invaders taking over Earth. Okay, so that's what's going on with this script. It's very good, very well written. Now, we don't have a name. We don't have a name for it yet. One of my writers said, oh, let's do frequency of peace. And I thought, no, that's too many M&M pieces. So we're just going to call it working title for now. It don't matter. Act 1, grocery store, day. So this thing starts out in the grocery store, the lights are dim, and what we're doing is we're introduced into this younger gentleman named Jake. Jake is 27 years old, he's 6'2". Okay, he's lean, observant, and he's the bag boy. Bag boys, bagging groceries. Bagging groceries with mechanical efficiency. One of his coworkers is Kate, 25 years old, she's a skinny little redhead. She's a really nice little girl, and she produces, she's the produce clerk, and she produces, a friendly feeling when it comes to relations with Jake and another fellow named Phil and some of the other co-workers. So Kate asks her, for example, you ever think we're all just NPCs? Where Jake replies, very witty, NPCs don't bag their own existential dread. Okay, and our next coworker here is Phil. Phil is 35, and he's broader built, and he stacks cereal boxes. In fact, let's keep this right here. All right, now Phil's a little older, like I said, he's 35, and he just stacks, he's a stalker. So he's stocking cereal boxes, paper towels, the new inventory comes in, and he unpacks it, and he puts it on its designated shelves. So Phil's personality in one-liner is, $5 as the world ends before my lunch break. Okay, Phil is real witty. He's a little more experienced. He's been on the job for a while. Enters Aaron, our next character. Aaron. Make sure you can hear me. Aaron. There we go. You got to make sure you guys are paying attention here too. Okay. Now Aaron is 30 years old. He's very calm, very observant. Very, very observant. Okay, so he's always paying attention to what's going on. And he always just comes in to challenge Jake, which is our lead character. So, and he always says, one-liner for him would be, you ever wonder if peace is just a control in a nicer outfit? Which is very, very funny because it's foreshadowing for later in the movie. Later. There we go. Gotta make sure, this mic, I'm sorry folks, this mic is not cutting it here. Here's what we're gonna do. Bear with me here folks. We don't have a lot of time. There we go. I'm just going to talk like this. So, ooh. Ooh. All right, our next scene in the film, after the grocery store is established with our mainly young adult cast, we see a bar, and it's nighttime in the bar. Okay, now Jake sees his brother. Now him and his brother have not got along. There is bad blood. Bad blood. They've had a lot of family disputes and disagreements over the years, and he has not seen his brother in a long, long time. So his brother, kind of walks up to him. He walks up to him, and he says, I didn't think you'd show your face. Yeah, I didn't think you'd show your face. And Jake says, well, I didn't think you'd still be here, big brother. And so, what we're seeing is a, opposition between siblings. So an older brother and a younger brother, and there's some dysfunction here. They're aggressive towards each other. They don't like each other at all. And of course, they're meeting in a bar. And so that's also going to be later, foreshadowing later, as this is a common theme in these scripts, folks, is foreshadowing. We foreshadow in statements. We foreshadow using the setting. We foreshadow many, many times in the plot. And that's part of the most affecting, technique when it comes to the story, is using that tool of foreshadowing. Okay, so our next act is Aaron. Aaron's in the car, right? And somehow Jake gets wrapped up with Aaron. Now Aaron, I failed to explain it earlier, but Aaron jumps in to this weird relationship with Jake, where Aaron always comes in to Jake's workplace, and he always questions him and harasses him about spiritual questions, like, do you think God exists, and what's your belief in Jesus, and all this, all this religious shamrocks. And so it kind of confuses Jake, but Jake's trying to be nice because Aaron's a customer. But Jake's kind of sick of seeing him. And one night at the bar, Aaron's there, and Jake decides to get a ride home from him because it's like, well, why not? They've all been drinking and everything. And what happens is Aaron is driving Jake home, and he says, he kind of turns around and he stops watching the road, and Jake's looking at him like, what are you doing? What the hell are you doing? This is dangerous. And he says, hey, if something came and offered unity, would you resist it? And he pulls out this weird looking thing. It's this translucent, gooey thing like this, and he points it at him, and there's all these dimensional light tracking and lightning. It's like lightning in a bottle, if you can imagine, lightning in a bottle, and he points it at him, and the next thing you know, boom, screen goes black, and you hear a big crash. And so you almost think that Aaron was trying to kill Jake, which we find out he really was. But there's also a hint of the FS, the foreshadow. Okay, so the next scene we see is Jake is in his bedroom, and he's waking up, and he's whiplashed, and he's confused, and he's tired, and he's not sure what happened the night before. But as the audience, we got a glimpse of what happened, but we don't know the whole picture yet. So, next thing Jake does is he turns on the TV, and on the TV, the news plays. And it says, extraterrestrial visitors have arrived. Global leaders are optimistic. Something along the lines of that. And so Jake is not only recovering from the trauma of his car crash, but he's seeing on the news that extraterrestrial aliens have come to Earth to establish diplomacy, is what the human beings are saying. And so, he thinks that's pretty bizarre, and he's tripping out, and so, but he's still got to get to work, and so he's in this daze, he's got to disassociating, he's confused, he's not sure what's going on, and he's going through his day to day, because that's all he knows is the routine in which that he had. So, on his way to work, he's driving, and he sees a big meteor crash somewhere out in the woods on the way to work. He goes, man, what's that? And so he drives up to it, and there's like I said, you see this object again, this translucent gel-like mass, faintly shaped like a pistol. And he picks it up because he's confused on what it is, and it wraps around his hand, kind of like a cobra or a snake. Just wrap, wrappity wrap all around the arm. And inside, we have these swirling dimensional tunnels. We have collapsing light structures and frequency distortion. So if you can imagine what that kind of looks like I said earlier, it's kind of like lightning in a bottle. There's all this dimensional light phenomenon happening contained in this tiny little gel capsule thing. But it's like goo. It's wrapped around his arm, and he fires it, and it shoots a distorted pulse. This distortion pulse ripples silently across the land that he's on, and it breaks a tree in half. So he found out real quick, basically, that it was a weapon of some sort. Anyway, it freaks him out, and he throws it off, and he gets back in his car, and he's just like trying to be in denial, just like, whatever, I gotta go to work, I'm not gonna think about all this, this is a bad dream, I'm not waking up from. So he continues to drive, and he's driving into the city. And to get into the city, he had to go from the other end, where there's a point lookout with public use of binoculars. So he uses these binoculars to look at the beach, which is across on the other side of the city. Okay. So, and now, when he's looking through these binoculars, here's the jump scare, if you will, psychologically. He sees two 10-foot black armored beings walk towards the shoreline. Okay, he's looking through the binoculars, zoomed up, and he's seeing this from miles away, and he's going, what in the, And there's these armored figures have these segmented metallic plates, rough cast surfaces, these subtle dark gray undertones in the sunlight. And they got these helmets on with this blue beam across, and under their legs of these armored soldiers is all these little creatures that look like ants. Okay, so imagine magnifying ants, but it had this glowing blue skin aura to it, and so. These little rather large black ants with patches of glowing blue are just swarming the beach under the legs of these big 10-foot armored creatures, okay? And now these things kind of look like the big ones, the big 10-foot ones. They kind of look like hamsters, if you will. So imagine a 10-foot hamster covered in armor. Yeah, right. It's really it's insane. It's a crazy concept, and so I think it's fairly original when it comes to the design of something scientific or even more so science fiction. So it's very very good. And so he's seeing this big war. Now these things have a similar object to what the pistol that he found out in the woods just an hour or two earlier, except they're like longer. They look like rifles. And anyway, long story short, on this beach, the military is there, and they're fighting off these big armored things and all these ants. And he's got the news playing on the radio in his car, and the door's open while he's looking through the binoculars, and he has a full blast. And they said that there's a big, large military takeover standoff with these extraterrestrial beings on the beach. And it's just this big war. But diplomatic leaders, and even the senator and mayor of the local city officials, are saying that the war is going to stay contained on the beach and for people to not worry about it. And so, that's that. I guess there's a big war, and we have our leaders telling us, don't worry. Don't worry, kind of a familiar phenomenon happening today in real life. Real life. Okay? So our next scene is where Jake finally makes it to work. Okay, after all of this, he's still, I mean, he's in a daze. He doesn't know really what to think. But he goes to work, and so he walks into the grocery store, and the door opens, bing, the automatic doors, ding, ding, and then they close behind him. And there's some laughter and a little bit of a conversation. And he walks in, and the whole store is empty. It's empty, which is very weird for a grocery store. Let me tell you, a grocery store is never empty. I don't care if it's before closing or if it just opened. It's empty, and there's only 2 or 3 finely dressed men sitting at one of the check stands. And like I said, they were quietly laughing and talking to each other, and they kind of tense up, but they're smiling, and they're reserved. And they see Jake walk in, and they go real quick to rush him. They go, "Hey, how you doing? It's Jake. Welcome back, Jake." And Jake's confused because he's like, "I never even introduced myself. I don't know who these people are." And he says, Jake's like, "Where's my boss? Where's my coworker? Where is everybody?" He says, "Oh, come with us. They're all in the break room." Which the break room is a very, very large room in the back of the store. Whoa, way back in the store. Way back. You can't see it from the front, right? So he follows them all the way to the back, and that's where this scene kind of comes back in. So I had to explain that first. So they open through another door, and as they walk in, everyone's laughing and talking and hanging out, and everybody's back there. Everyone's in the break room, all the customers too. The boss, the customers, managers, and the co-workers. And so Jake kind of walks in, and he stops, and he sees all of this, and scattered around are all these finely dressed men that he was greeted by. If you can imagine, there's some religious groups out there that kind of inspired this visual. So think of finely dressed people trying to teach you about religion. There's several groups, but there's one in particular. I'll let you figure that one out. And so, yeah, the break room is full. Every employee, the customers, even the boss, are all seated at these folding tables, almost like a school cafeteria. There's paper plates, coffee cups, snacks. They're all eating lunch. They're all hanging out, just like nothing's weird. And the whole situation is very, very weird. There's no panic, no confusion. Everybody's animated, smiling, talking over each other, excited. And so Jake walks into the doorway, and these well-dressed men are still behind him watching. The voices behind him from the noise, you can hear all the employees, "Oh, it just makes sense now. We've never been this unified before. I'm actually excited. I'm happy to be part of the team." It feels good to be aligned. All these weird little one statements kind of flow in and out of these conversations. And Jake kind of picks up on those, even though he's still pretty confused, from the crash and from seeing a war and from the weapon and everything. Anyway, so the boss notices Jake right off the bat, and he says, "Jake!" And then there's Phil, the coworker I talked about earlier, who's always witty, always kind of a smart ass. And he's super friendly and happy to see Jake. He says, "Hey, Jake!" And then there's Kate. Kate is there too. And everyone's talking like they've been brainwashed. And we find out later that they very much have. They very much have been brainwashed. And so that's what's going on. But we don't know that yet. And so the greetings ripple through the room, just like the frequency of the weapon distortion and all this. And Phil tells him, "You're just in time." And Jake is like, man, this in his head, he's thinking, this is wrong. Phil's always sarcastic, dry. Now he's all warm, and what's going on here? And the boss comes up and says, "Welcome to alignment." And the whole group kind of turns to him, all the customers and everything. They say, "Alignment." And Jake is just like really freaking out at this point. And these finely well-dressed men say, "All right, well, come over here, Jake, now that you've seen everybody that you know and that they're happy and everything. Come over here and watch this little propaganda thing that we have for you." And that's very much what it is it's this promo of these finely dressed men wanting Jake to join their group, right? And it's propaganda, and we find out what it is as we go into detail. So the narrator jumps on. And on the screen, you see a bright daylight battlefield, and humans are organized in formation, and they're all together, and these massive black ants, the same ones that we saw earlier with the blue, okay, the blue, and the humans are shooting at them, and the ants are dying and everywhere, and the narrator comes in, right? For centuries, humanity has struggled with division. And it cuts to another scene. Humans of all races standing shoulder to shoulder. But when faced with true disorder, unity becomes inevitable. You know, it shows a human soldier helping another one up. And he goes on the screen, "We're stronger together!" All right, cut to the command base. Now we're back in the command base of the military. And the commander's on the radio. "Be advised, the real intruders are approaching your sector." And all these unaligned humans rush forward, disorganized, and they're armed. They have guns, bats, whatever they can find to fight. And the other humans who are, who were just fighting the aliens now start to fight the other human beings that are coming there. And the narrator says, "Resistance is not freedom. Resistance is fragmentation." Clash. All the rebels fall efficiently. The music remains hopeful throughout this whole thing too, by the way. So this is a really sick video, if you imagine. Really, really manipulative. Very much a psyop, if you will, an MK Ultra type deal. And it cuts to a suburban neighborhood, and all these humans who just killed all the other ones are rebuilding, and there's children playing, and they're all happy, and everything's good. And in the background, you see two of these big armored beings, the big hamster aliens that we talked about earlier. You see them in the background, way in the background. And so it paints this picture that everything's going to be fine as long as us human beings turn against the other human beings. And the narrator says, "Alignment is not surrender, it's clarity." Boom, screen fades to black. And, there's probably a pause of silence there as far as creative direction goes, as I want to add. But then the finely dressed man kind of pops up and says, "Hey, what'd you think? Did you like my video?" And Jake's sitting there like silent still. And then the finely dressed man takes one of these pistol things that we were talking about earlier, and he puts it on the table and he says, "So what do you think, Jake? You want to join us?" And Jake just kind of sits there and he picks up the weapon and it wraps around his hand, and he just looks at the finely dressed man and shoots. Boom! And he misses, and it shoots the wall behind the finely dressed man. The aliens, basically, we figure out these guys are aliens, but they're, disguised as human beings. And that alien doesn't even think twice about it. Let me check my time here. 12:20. Okay, it's 12:20, so I have to go soon. But anyway, Jake just continues to shoot the gun everywhere. Bam, 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 bam. And no one cares. No one cares. Everyone is totally normal and still smiling and happy. And it just freaks him out, and they try to grab him. They say, one of them looks at the other, one of the finely dressed aliens looks at the other one and says, "Oh my gosh, he's not turning." And, so they try to grab him, and Jake barely gets out of there with his life. And so one of the big concepts in this film that we did cover today, we'll have to dive deep into it next class, because I only have this classroom for about 10 more minutes. Actually, I'm supposed to be the hell out of here. But the big theme here, the takeaway, is that concept of manipulation. Okay? It's kind of like, if I were to reference a film that maybe you guys have seen, Midsummer. Remember the end of Midsummer, and they're all laughing and crying with her after they killed all of her friends, and she assimilates, right? They break her psychology to the point where she assimilates and just becomes happy, joins the cult with no questions asked. Much like a lot of religious affiliations out there. And so that's one of the biggest themes in this film, is the, vulnerable state of humanity when manipulation and taking advantage of comes into play. So it's very, very, very creative for a sci-fi picture, I think. It really touches onto the psyche, kind of turns it into a psychological thriller, but also keeps that science fiction feel. So that's all that we have for today. Thank you for showing up. I really appreciate it, guys. We will be here again later in the week. Today's Thursday. So tomorrow, tomorrow we have one more class. And hopefully we'll have a little more time to cover all the ground that we need to cover. But again, thank you so much. And bye-bye. Bye-bye. I'll put it up on Canvas and you check it out. And we'll go from there. Hey.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for showing up.
Together?
Oh yeah, let's go.